Happy New Year! How do you have the best year ever this year? Hey everyone, Howard Kingston here, entrepreneur, marketer, and co-founder of Growth Velocity Academy. In this episode, how do you have the best year ever? Of all your years, how do you have the best one? Now, this is something I am really passionate about. Many years ago, in my first ever job, soon after I got kind of kicked out of university when I was, age 19 or something, I had a job and they sent me on a training course, and I wasn't, I just went along, and it was run by this guy called Jack Black, not the comedian, but this guy by the same name, a Scottish guy. And it was the first time I'd ever come across something about personal development. It was a course on personal development. And at that point, I remember him talking about how most people go through life and every year they don't have a plan and they just go from year to year, going from essentially looking forward to the next holiday. So they have a holiday and the holiday's nice, and they come back from the holiday and then they just look forward to the next holiday and stuff like that. And I was like, I remember just sitting there, I was age 19 or whatever, going, that's kind of me, right? That's what I do. What? He's talking about me. And then he said, you know what? There's a different way. You can actually plan out where you want to get to. And I was just like, this was just like, why did no one tell me this stuff before? I remember just light bulbs and fireworks were going off in my brain. I was like, what? Anyway, and that led me down a path of setting my first goals for the first time. And set my first ever goals. And I remember I set goals for that year. And the next year, it was pretty big things. I buy a house and, things like that. And I remember I did them. And I remember coming back the next year, I was like, this stuff is real. Goal setting is real. And I remember it, and ever since then, I really take goal setting seriously. And many of you that know me may have come to my goal setting sessions. I run them every year that I help all my community. And I take this really, really seriously. And I love goals. They get me so excited. And I find, listen, the best time to do your goal setting is between Christmas and New Year. I think it's a beautiful time, or just after New Year, beautiful time of the year. But just like that, I think it's a Chinese proverb. When's the best time to plant an oak tree is 100 years ago. The second best time is now. Even if you're listening to this and you haven't set your goals yet, and it's past Christmas or whatever, it's still a great time to do it. Okay, so in this episode, I want to talk about, if you're thinking about setting goals, how to do it well, how to set goals in a way that you can have the best year ever. So, tip number one is, the first thing you want to do is, when you're thinking of setting goals for the year ahead, the first thing to do, though, is actually a bit counterintuitive. Stop for a moment and pause and reflect. So many times we're, getting the next thing. Oh yeah, I want this year to be better, and this, and I want this, and well, hold on a second. Let's just pause for a second and let's just reflect on the year gone by, because there's lessons in there. I'm a marketer, right? I love growing businesses, and when I want to get lessons, I'll go into my analytics to find out what has worked and what hasn't. Okay, and it's funny, in life we don't really do that, because obviously we don't have analytics, but you can do that yourself. So the first step I'll do before I plan my year to have the best year ever, I'll reflect on the year that's just gone by, and I'll make a list. I won't spend too long on this, maybe 5-10 minutes. I make one list of the wins, the things that have gone well, and then I'll make another list of the things that haven't gone as well as I would have liked, and then the last list will be the lessons I've learned from those things. Okay. So you see, all these things are gifts, and whether things have gone well or not, like they're all lessons, right? And the reason this is a really important step is if we're only looking forward and we don't look back, sometimes we forget some of the great things we've actually achieved. You go, wow, yeah, I achieved that. Yeah, that's great. It sets you up for, you're motivated for the year ahead. And then also, there's some lessons in there that you want to make sure you learn before you set your goals for the year ahead, because you might otherwise, maybe set a goal in the wrong way or whatever again. All right. So the first thing I'll do is I'll look back and I'll do a retrospective on my year gone by, spend 5 or 10 minutes, and that sets me up nicely for setting my goals. Tip number 2 is think big. All right. So once you're thinking of planning the year ahead, the first thing you want to do is look way past the first year. All right. So I remember one of my favorite books I read many years ago that had a big impression on me. There's a book called What They Don't Teach You in Harvard Business School. And in it talks about a study that was taken place in Harvard Business School in 1979. Some researchers went in to kind of study the Harvard MBA class, which at the time was like the peak of like human business people, right? All in this room, about 1,000 people in this course. And they studied them. They watched them for a full year to kind of study their habits and their traits and their behaviors, what they did. And they tracked them on their career for the next decade. And 10 years later, they had a look at the people that were in that class, and they were able to see that some people were far more successful than others since the MBA, since the class. All right. So not necessarily coming into the class, but more so the success they had after the course, after the Harvard MBA. And they found something interesting. They found there was a small number of people, 3% of people in the room, that far outperformed the rest, were far more successful. And this was interesting. And they went back to look at their notes from 1979 and said, is there anything that those people were doing back then that helped, lead to their success 10 years later? And they found there was one really strong correlation. Okay, can you think what it was? What do you think it was? So I ask people this question all the time because I'm really interested in it. And one, the most common things I get are people say, oh, maybe they were confident, maybe they were well connected, maybe their parents had money, things like that. And like, listen, I'm sure all these things can contribute. And, maybe some of these things help them get into the Harvard MBA, but that's not actually what we're talking about. We're talking about, for everyone that was in the Harvard MBA, what was the thing that separated the best from the best? Okay. And that was one thing. When the researchers looked at their research, they found there was one key thing. And that was that the 3% that outperformed the rest set goals and made a clear plan how to execute against them. Set a goal, wrote it down, not just in their head, and made a clear plan how to execute against it. And that's what we're talking about here today. So that was a big lesson for me. And what I'd ask you to do as step 2 in your goal planning process is set a long-term goal. Now, I like a 5-year span because I've really found when I've reflected on my life, my life has gone in cycles of in and around 5 years. All right, you can achieve a lot in 5 years. You can become a thought leader in almost any industry. If you really, if you want to become a thought leader in an industry, 5 years is achievable to do that. If you want to launch and scale a business, 5 years is a great time to be able to really scale that. You want to get a PhD or go back to university, it's going to take about 5 years. So 5 years I find is a really good time span. And to think of that, to help you with that, I always like to think of a question. I picked 5 years from now. So let's say it's 2025, 2026, 2027, whatever it is, whenever you're listening to this. And imagine you met yourself. You bumped into yourself in the street and you went for coffee and you were asking yourself questions about where you are in your business or career, what's happening in your personal life, things like that. What would you want you to say to yourself, the future version of you to say to you, that you just be like, yes, I'm really loving what I'm hearing here. So you really want to paint a vivid vision of where you want to be. Okay. Now, if you want some help with that, there's a great book by Cameron Herold called Vivid Vision. I've used it, I've read it many times, and it helps you kind of project a future, because some people I've found really struggle with that. So if you're the type of person that finds it hard to visualize things in the future, it could be useful reading that book, for example. If not, just like as a starting point, guys, just think about this time in 5 years. Where would you like to be in your career and business? Maybe list 2 or 3 things. Where would you like to be in your personal life? List 2 or 3 things. That would be a really good starting point. Okay. And then tip number 3 is get focused. Now, this is getting focused and planning out your year this year for the next 12 months. Now, can you see how this whole process kind of connects together? This is about focusing where you want to be at the end of this year, 12 months. So hopefully if you've followed the steps so far, you've kind of learned some lessons, and then you've planned a 5-year plan, and your 1-year plan, if you have a 5-year goal, which you should do, your 1-year goals should be easier to set, because you should have a not too big list of where you want to be in 5 years. And guess what? Your 1-year goals should be a stepping stone towards your 5-year goals. This is a process which the military called backwards planning. All right. And it's all about setting a long-term goal and then working backwards from that. It's a far more effective way to plan something than just planning the next step. Because otherwise what happens is you might not think as strategically as you maybe should, because sometimes to achieve a 5-year plan, you will take 5 years. There's like 5 yearly steps there. Okay. So you want to think what your 5-year plan is. Maybe it's like, writing a best-selling book. Okay. So maybe this year, the first step for that this year is to write every day. So maybe this year is about getting into the habit of writing, and next year it could be about writing your first draft. Can you see how these are all steps? Okay. So when you're setting your 1-year goals, you want to set your goals. And really, when I think of 1-year goals, I always recommend your 1-year goals to be what are called SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Now, an example of what is not a SMART goal is I want to be really rich. I want to be happy this year. Now, that's not a good goal, because you never know. Like, how do you know if you've achieved it? Well, like, how do you define if you're happy or not? Like, you might be happy the day before the end of the year next year, but then you're not the day after. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's subjective. So a good SMART goal, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound, is something which, you could call someone off the street and they could look at something objectively and say, yes, that's been achieved or not. So, for example, if your goal was to write every day this year, that you could show it to them. You could show the words that you have written. You've written, like, for example, 100 words a day, and you have, like, maybe at this point, maybe 40,000 words written. That's very objective. Someone could say, yes, you have. So something like that. Or if you're launching a company, I always like those entrepreneurs and marketers out there. I always like really thinking about, what is the number of customers that you would like to have, or how much revenue would you like to have? So that's a very focusing thing. Rather than just saying grow my business, no, pick a number of customers or an amount of revenue that you'd like to hit. Does that make sense? Okay. And I'd always list them out on I use Evernote because I have it on every device, and I can quickly bring up my goals anytime I want to, every single week when I plan my weeks. But I'll save how I plan my weeks for another episode. Okay. So guys, in this episode, we've been really talking about how to get the best year ever. And to get the best year ever, remember those people in Harvard. They set a clear goal 5 years from now, and they work backwards from it. And they had a clear plan. And guess what? If it's good enough for them, is probably going to be good enough for you too, and me too. So let's learn a lesson from them, and let's make sure that we set intentions for the year ahead. We reflect on the year gone by. We set a big long-term plan first, which is our 5-year goal, and then we break that down into a yearly goal. Okay, no more than maybe 4 or 5 or 6 goals max each year is what I think is the sweet spot. The fewer the better. I've learned the hard way. One year I think I had 10, and it was just too many. You become unfocused. So it's far better to have like 5 or so, or max 5 say goals a year. All right. So guys, hopefully that's useful. Now, every single year, I do a series of live goal setting trainings with my community. It's completely free to join. I just do it to give back, and people have messaged me. I've been doing this for years now, and I've got emails and messages of people saying that they did this and they changed their lives. So I'd love you to join me. So if you're listening to this around Christmas or New Year's, just check out the episode notes. There'll be a link below where you can get access to that, and you can join me. If you're joining me another time of the year, that if you're listening to this as a different time of year, you know what? I still do trainings every single week. So please do click the link below and join me on that. And just keep an eye out around Christmas or New Year's next year, because I'll be doing this training for everyone again. All right. So guys, peace out. Don't forget, if you do want some one-on-one help, I also have a link below so that you can just click, get access to one of my coaches who can step you through some more one-on-one help, how to plan out your year. Really happy to do that free of charge for any of my listeners. All right. Okay, guys, have a great one. Peace out, and I'll see you on the next episode.